Hello, I'm Gonzo Gates, host of the 90s Flashback. Thanks for listening to this demo.
Alrighty then. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice cognac.
It's time to take a trip back in time, back to the decade of Doc Martens, flannel shirts, grunge music, and keeping those Tamagotchi alive.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
Back to when Xena was a warrior princess. Austin Powers was an international man of mystery, and we hung out at the Central Perk with our friends.
Shut up! The camera adds 10 pounds.
So how many cameras are actually on you?
It's the 90s Flashback with your host, Gonzo Gates.
The 90s Flashback takes your listeners on a 2-hour trip back to the decade that saw Bill Clinton elected president, the emergence of the World Wide Web and with it email and instant messaging, news events like the Oklahoma City bombing, the standoff with the Branch Davidians in Waco, and the capture of the Unabomber. Seinfeld, Home Improvement, Frasier, and Friends were top TV shows of the decade, and comedians like Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler, and Chris Farley were making big hits at the box office. Musically, in between the pop sounds of Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston, and Celine Dion, we saw the rise of grunge and hip-hop. If you'd like to add the 90s Flashback to your station's lineup, contact Mike Tyler at Fishnet Syndication, 214-281-8473. So relax and enjoy this trip back to the 1990s. We head back to the year Steve Jobs returns to Apple Computer, the company he founded, just as Microsoft buys a $150 million stake in the company. South Park debuts on Comedy Central, and the world is stunned by the death of Princess Diana.
CNN Center, Britain's Princess Diana has been killed in a car crash in Paris. Her companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, was also killed in the crash along with the driver of the car. We get more now from CNN Siobhan Darrow.
1997 is the year. Here's Savage Garden with their first hit, I Want You, on the 90s Flashback. That was Madonna taking us back to 1994 with the hit I'll Remember from the movie With Honors, starring Brendan Fraser and Joe Pesci. I'm Gonzo Gates, and this is the 90s Flashback, taking you on a time travel adventure through the 1990s. Listen to this.
It's another
90s Rewind.
Over the hills and far away, Teletubbies come to play.
Goodbye, Rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the greatest place to serve.
Maybe he's like passed out in the bathroom.
He's not in the bathroom himself.
I'll dance with you, Romy.
That's this week's 90s Rewind. Think about the clips you heard and see if you can figure out what year all that took place. I'll be right back with the answer, plus 90s hits from Eagle Eye, Cherry, Hanson, and the artist who set the record for the longest time between number one hits. All that and so much more when the 90s Flashback returns. All right, trivia question time. What band originally was named Tabitha's Secret? The answer? The band formed in Orlando, Florida, and burst onto the music scene back in 1997 with a top 5 hit called Push. Over the next few years, Matchbox 20 would hit the charts a total of 10 times. Here's one of them from early 1998. It's 3 a.m. on the 90s Flashback. I'm Gonzo Gates, your host and tour guide on this trip back to the 1990s. We're up to our weekly test of your 90s movie knowledge. Here's this week's mystery movie clip one more time.
Ow! You're tearing my ear off!
Making fun of a little kid for trying to read. Are you psycho? Do you not have a soul?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I've been physically abused in the ear.
You keep your mouth shut for the next 2 weeks or I'm gonna fail you. End of story.
Got any ideas? Well, the movie is about a man-child who has to prove his worth by going back to school in order to assume control of his father's hotel business. It was one of the breakout roles for a comedian who got his start on MTV's Remote Control, then a stint on Saturday Night Live, which led to this movie and many others. You got it yet? Well, if you knew it was Billy Madison starring Adam Sandler, then you know your 90s movies. On the radio that year was Blessed Union of Souls with their first hit. Here's I Believe on the 90s Flashback. That was Savage Garden from 1997 with To the Moon and Back, wrapping up this week's 90s Flashback theme peat. Did you figure out the theme? The songs again were R.E.M's Man on the Moon and Savage Garden's To the Moon and Back. Ah, there it is. With a celestial theme, both songs have moon in the title. Stick around, our time travel adventure continues. We've got music locked and loaded from the Black Crowes, Duran Duran, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and solo music from Boy George and so much more when the 90s Flashback returns. That was TLC in the 90s Flashback with a tune that debuted in the charts in 1994. From the album Crazy Sexy Cool, the Grammy winner Creep. I'm Gonzo Gates. Listen to this. That's this week's Backtrack Song of the Day. You got any ideas? Well, the top 5 hit was based on native Taiwanese chants and was a monster hit both here in the US and abroad, where it went to number 1 in 10 countries, including Greece, Sweden, Norway, and Ireland. Got it yet? Well, if you knew it was the 1994 hit from Enigma, Return to Innocence, then you know your 90s music. Here it is, going in the right direction on the 90s Flashback. That was the only hit for LA rock band Blind Melon. It peaked at number 20 on the charts the same year. Robin Williams loses custody of his kids in his divorce from Sally Field and decides to dress in drag in order to spend more time with them. So he becomes their nanny, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mr. Hillard, do you consider yourself humorous?
I used to. There was a time when I found myself funny. But today, you have proven me wrong. Thank you.
1993 was the year. No Rain was the hit. I'm Gonzo Gates, and this is the 90s Flashback, at least what's left of it. Join me again next week at the same time for another trip back to the 1990s. I'll leave you with one final 90s hit. Let's rewind back to the year John Gotti is no longer the Teflon Don. He's convicted and sentenced to prison for the murder of former Gambino boss Paul Castellano. 1992 was the year. Here's Christian singer Kathy Ciccoli with Everything Changes. This has been a presentation of Gonzo Gates Productions. All rights reserved. No animals were harmed in the making of this broadcast. Limit 1 coupon per customer. No purchase necessary. Remember, time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. Thanks again for listening to